Good afternoon and welcome to NACD's 75th anniversary annual meeting and the first of several sessions of breakout sessions where y'all can learn about things that districts are doing across the country. In this session, the Elkhart County Soil and Water Conservation District will present a no-nonsense approach to building relationships between the land, people, and local organizations through the Stormwater Alliance Management Program, otherwise known as SWAMP. By utilizing local dollars to implement conservation on the ground, SWAMP helps prevent runoff, increase infiltration, and decrease nutrient loss, benefiting the land user, the local watershed, and beyond. Joining us today from the Elkhart County District is Jim Hess. He is the district manager of the Elkhart SWCD in Elkhart County, Indiana. He was born and raised in Elkhart County and is the seventh generation on his family farm, which consists of a beef cow operation, farrow to finish hog operation, and growing corn, beans, and hay. He has always been involved with the farming operation and was always looking for better ways to increase productivity out of the land while being a good steward. He became involved in the local SWCD while in college and served on the district's board until being hired on as a staff member 5 years ago. Thanks so much, Jim, for joining us today, and for all of you in the audience joining us. I will turn it over to Jim, but before I do that, remember the question and answer session is available through the chat. Jim is here with us today to answer any questions you have during the presentation. Jim, thanks so much, and take it away.
Well, thank you, everyone, for inviting us here in Elkhart County to share with you and a little bit about what we're doing. And like Coleman had said, we kind of came across a no-nonsense approach of using local dollars to put some conservation on the ground. And when we came about this, and I'm going to go over a little bit about our name of the SWAMP program. It's a little bit unique. And if you look and see, there's an alliance and a management in the middle of that thing. And we utilized our stormwater monies in the county, and we looked at that in different ways. But the biggest thing that we wanted to get across was we had a great partnership with many different organizations. And we're very blessed being soil and water conservation districts that we have a great partnership with so many different organizations and people. But we wanted to create something that was an alliance. And I wanted something that would work as the glue that kind of holds everything together. And not only as from a landowner perspective and a producer and a business, but also county government and different departments and different organizations within that network to work together. And that was important for us to look at and create that alliance, and then us as an SWCD to help manage that. A lot of times we are the ones that wear the white hat, and it gives us an opportunity to kind of be that moderator and mediate different things. And one of the main things was to bring conservation to the forefront of many of the other county departments, and for them to look to us for answers. And along with that, in the initial beginning of this, we wanted to look at how do we have organizations and stuff coming to us, asking us for to come to their events, rather than for in the past, we would be reaching out and asking, can we come be there and do different events and different things? And now we wanted something that created attention and gave people opportunities to invite us, and we were the ones being asked to come and present. And so it was, that's kind of how the alliance came in there, and it stuck, and we came up with a kind of a acronym of SWAMP. And I am now known throughout the county as Swampy, and that I guess I could be called a lot worse, but it's something that draws attention, and it works for us. Just to kind of give an overview of where we are, I know we're the National Association of Conservation Districts. We're, looking at the map, we're Indiana. We're up here in the northern part, and we're in that Great Lakes region. And clear up in the northern tip, kind of center of the state, at the north end, up against Michigan, pretty close to Illinois and Ohio, but all of our water at this point is going into the St. Joe River Basin. And in that basin, as you look at that slide there, there's 694,000 acres in that watershed, and we're just a square down there at the bottom corner. But all of our 99% of our water is all headed towards Lake Michigan, and that just gives you a little perspective of where we're coming from and where our water goes. And like everything else, this is the thing that works for us as far as keeping our water clean and knowing where it goes, and trying to clean it up before it moves on. And as you see in that St. Joe River Basin that goes clear up into Michigan, comes down through that St. Joe River, comes down through the northern part of our county, and exits there on the west, goes through St. Joe County and on back up into Michigan, into Lake Michigan. So it's a very unique watershed. We also have Elkhart River in that as well. That's a major contributor. So we have two major waterways going right through our county. And so it kind of led to, we need to make sure we're protecting our waters. So as we started out with this swamp program, and we looked at different things, and up on this screen, there's a lot of things that we don't want to redo, but it was something we needed to redo. When we thought about the concepts and ideas, we looked at all of our partners and all of our organizations that we work with. NRCS has all the programs with EQIP and everything else that we're doing. But when I got involved in conservation, and I'm going to kind of date myself, as we were working through in the 80s and 90s, we started falling short. And in the last couple of weeks, I was going through our office photos and different things, and we saw a lot of conservation being put in place in the 60s and 70s, but about in the 80s and 90s, it started falling off a little bit in our area. And so we looked at, and when I came on board about 5 years ago, that was one of the things that hit me, was how do we look at getting conservation back at the forefront of farmers, landowners, businesses around the community? How do we help do that? And when we looked at it, we were all looking at a federal dollar or federal aid or a grant to come in, and sometimes that didn't work. And so we wanted to use something that was kind of out of the box, but it was easy. It was a no nonsense. It was a common sense approach that people would understand and could utilize, and it still got conservation on the ground, kept it on the ground, and it grew. So we looked at our local dollars, and we wanted to see where those were at. So when I was tossing around this idea, and I get a lot of my ideas either in the combine or unfortunately hauling manure, those were the ideas that were bouncing through my head. And when I looked at the ditches that were surrounding me and the different fields, I had to think about who are the players that I need at the table. And so as we kind of looked through and evaluated that on who would be our players that would come and be part of this, and who do we want on our side, because we want to build a strong team. I want something that's there, and I want something that's solid. Our county surveyor is in charge of all of our regulated drains in our ditches. And so when we looked at different things, we went to the SWCD board, took that, and we invited the surveyor. We wanted the surveyor involved because ultimately our tiles all of our drainage ways are all going to our ditches, ultimately ending up in a regulated drain or going to the Elkhart River or St. Joe River and being passed on to somebody else. So we went to the surveyor and we ran this idea past our county surveyor, and he liked it. And that's where it kind of started. Then from there, we looked at, all right, who all do we need to get around the table then to keep this thing going? And so we kind of brainstormed a little bit on funding sources and different things like that. But we looked at, and my next point was reinventing the wheel. And all the time we always say, we don't want to reinvent the wheel. But at this point and where we were at from conservation wise and from a future standpoint, we really did need to reinvent that wheel. Some of the spokes were missing. It wasn't totally round anymore. And so we wanted to create something that was similar, but yet different. And so what we did is we sat down with and looked at, like I said earlier, all of our partners, all of our groups that we work with. And we had a great working relationship with NRCS, and they had great programs. And I wanted something that kind of mocked their programs. So we kind of kickstarted this with a Clean Water Indiana grant back in 2016, just to kind of kickstart it. And we put a couple things in place to get that going, and we put that wheel back together, and we put all the spokes back in it. We tightened them down, made the wheel round again, and started pursuing forward. The other idea that we had was, and a concept that I usually want to look at strongly is I wanted to create a program that no was not an option. I wanted, no matter what group we went to, no matter what organization or landowner or producer or wherever we went, or county officials, no was not an option. We wanted a full bulletproof plan that was ultimately everybody would bite on and ride along with us. And so we had to come up with a program that didn't have too many holes in it and that not too many people could say no. The other piece of this was I wanted to show something for a return on investment, not only as from a landowner side of it, but from a county elected official, department heads, workers throughout there. I wanted to be able to show there's an investment. And so many times living in a farming community and dealing with conservation organizations and different things, we never really talk, we don't know what that return on investment is. A lot of times when we go and ask farmers, what is the return on investment? They can't put a dollar amount to it, but they know that it needs to be done. And so I wanted something that we could put a dollar amount to show different commissioners, county council members, different things like that, that would be able to show there is a dollar to this thing, and there is an investment, and there's a return, and it may not be in our generation, but 2, 3, 4 generations later, we might see that investment. But I wanted it to be instilled in this that is what we want. So as we move forward, we knew that we wanted a program much like what NRCS and different programs like that were already there, but we wanted to use our local dollars. And so we wanted local conservation with local dollars. So where do we start? And like I said, we started talking to the surveyors, we brainstormed. Now it was the backing. We needed to put a backbone into this thing. And so the SWCD board sat down and we decided our game plan on where that needed to go and how we needed to head, what direction we needed to head towards. And a lot of that was, where's the funding mechanism? Where and how do we get to a funding mechanism? Or how are we going to cost share this thing with local dollars? And so when I looked at different organizations that are already county boards, who do we go to? So the next step was, Surveyor was on board with us, was the drainage board. And so the SWCD board and myself went to the drainage board meeting and presented an option. And it was the swamp program that we wanted to initiate and run the concept past them to see if it stuck. And it did. The drainage board liked the thought. A lot of those were already farmers that were involved in many of the EQIP programs and different things that had been involved in farming and liked the concept of using this as a local dollar. Now, the map that was shown earlier shows northern Indiana. We have a lot of dairy. We have a lot of conservative Mennonites in our area that aren't able to use federal dollars or choose not to. But we wanted something that, and like came up with the different boards, we looked at how will that be perceived? And a lot of our community, a lot of the Amish community looked at it as it's county dollars stays in there and they would use it. So a lot of our soil and water board reached out to that community, drainage board reached out, and it took a hold. So the next step was, we have an MS4 department here in Elkhart County, and it's compiled of the stormwater board, and that's the SWCD board, the drainage board. We went to that stormwater board meeting and we presented that at the stormwater board meeting and to the stormwater board. And of that board is put together by 3 commissioners and the county surveyor. Well, I already knew the county surveyor was on that board when I started this. So I knew he was already in. I had 1 commissioner that I'd kind of run the idea past. So we had kind of a behind the scene agenda going into this thing, but they heard from the SWCD board and the drainage board, which typically doesn't normally happen, but it got us a chance to get in front of these people and explain kind of how we want to work conservation in Elkhart County. So along with that, I got a clip here that we want to show, just kind of a testimonial of one of our county commissioners.
So hi, I'm Mike Yoder, Elkhart County Commissioner and President of the Elkhart County Stormwater Board. I remember when the SWCD first brought this concept of the swamp program to us, that it very much attracted my attention and my interest because it was a way for us to collaborate in using MS4 stormwater dollars in a way that typically is not considered. So by putting some MS4 dollars together with the SWCD's program of encouraging cover crops, primarily, mirroring what the USDA does with our farm program projects, but growing and expanding upon that, we've actually had a very successful program in Elkhart County with a huge increase in cover crops, which has reduced the amount of sedimentation going into our own county ditches, rivers, and streams. So I like that idea of collaboration between using MS4 dollars in this new way, and I think it's something that cities across Indiana could do as well by partnering up with their MS4 partners, SWCD partners in the county. I'm also a dairy farmer and at one time farmed 1,000 acres. We don't farm that many now, it's only about 200 acres. But we've utilized cover crops in our dairy operation for many, many years. And so we were early adopters of that kind of practice and understand how valuable that is in the community. So perhaps that was one reason as a county commissioner I saw the value of showing other farmers in the community that this really works. And Farmers are the type that if they're willing to try something new, especially if there's a little bit of an incentive package there to do that. So overall, this was just a perfect package, I think, for agriculture, for MS4 districts, and for the SWCD to work together and create a better environment overall for your community.
So after we looked at that and started filling the gap and started putting the pieces of that puzzle together, now it was putting together an action plan. And so we had some backing, and we had support, and everybody was on board. So now we had to put it in place, and now we got down to the kind of the nitty gritty. And so I wanted to create something that ultimately somebody had our back. And so I wanted to create something that was at checks and balances. And so with the surveyor on board, we decided that we would keep them involved. And basically what we did was we came up with the idea of, we put together the plan, and the paper we could sign the paper, but I also wanted not only us as the SWCD to sign off and to look at that, but I also wanted the surveyor involved. And so every plan that comes through gets run past the surveyor department as well, so that department knows filter strips, grass waterways, where that activity is going on. It gave us a chance to work very closely with the different departments, and they have a ditch cleaning maintenance program. We could see what ditches were going to be cleaned. We could contact those farmers, let them know, and in that would be a swamp piece that would, for a cost share, usable piece for them. So surveyor was on board. Wanted to take some ownership of this thing as well as the SWCD. So we went that way to keep our checks and balances in place. And with the stormwater also being on board, that was another checks and balances. We could go and refer back to them. We could give them kind of a list of what we're doing, where's things heading, how are things are progressing throughout the county and conservation, and give them that return on investment look back. So next step was finding that funding source. And like we said earlier, we have an MS4 county. There's a stormwater fund that's collected, and that was our funding source. So a little bit about that stormwater fee and how that came about, that they're paid semi-annual, and it's added on our property tax bills. Residents for each parcel will pay $15 per year, and it supports that stormwater fee. For the non-residential parcels, they pay $15 per 3,600 square feet of impervious land. So any hard surface, parking lots, roofs, different things like that is figured up on our county GIS. And we work real closely with our GIS department and figure those out. But it kind of gave us, in a lot of ways, a lot of our farmers were paying more. And this was a way to kind of give it back. This kind of fit in that area for, as you paid in, this was an opportunity, and not everybody got it back, but in one way or another, what we wanted to do creating this program was to show maybe the people that didn't receive the money back, they received it in benefits of not taking it out of tax dollars in other places. And much like what we did with the surveyor, when we went to them, they're in control of the ditch with the ditch maintenance program. If I can convince the surveyors that we can hold back sediment from going in, now we can reduce their budget in a maintenance program and use those dollars elsewhere in projects and structures maybe that they were putting Band-Aids on. Now they can use that money to put in great structures that would stay put and not be just a Band-Aid. And so that was one of the things that we concepts that we went to and worked that way. So as we looked at the practices, we had 6 of them that fit real well with what we wanted to do. And it really worked well with us as far as being in that MS4. It was a priority site. We had to set up different things. So we put together our best management practices for our program. And in those was blind inlets, cover crops, filter strips, grade stabilizations, grassed waterways, and exclusion fencing. We have a lot of dairy. We have a lot of conservative Mennonites in our area, which graze. Exclusion fencing and keeping those out of our ditches was very important. We had a lot of grassed waterways that were put in the 60s and 70s that had gotten neglected and needed to be put back into place. And this was an opportunity for us to use local dollars to help landowners put those in. Grade stabilizations that were put in, we were able to put some of those back in. And by this, like this picture in this slide here, you can see we have a grassed waterway. There's a structure in there that got put in place, riprap around it, and we have cover crops seeded right up against that waterway. That was huge. One of the 2 biggest things that we have right now that have really taken a hold are our filter strips and cover crops. So our cover crops by far are the easiest things to incorporate and to put on. And so we knew that was going to be kind of our big ticket to getting the word out and getting conservation out. And the filter strips was a little more difficult, but they were starting to come along, and we've been able to really be able to utilize that. And that's again, re-emphasizing the surveyors piece of it. It gives them an access point. They need in on those ditch maintenance projects. This gives them and the farmer, landowner, producers a connection of meeting each other, being able, and not somebody just showing up and saying, we're going to clean your ditch. And by the way, we have a 75-foot easement onto your ditch and we can do whatever we want to. Now that kind of works together, and we have the opportunity to put possibly a filter strip up along there to create that sponge and keep the nutrients and sediment from going into our ditches. And then we finished up with our blind inlets that we had a lot of riser pipes that were typically used as vents when the tiles were put in, but soon found out that those could also be used as a drain. And again, another department we worked with was our county health department, and they deal with the illicit discharge. We didn't want in an ag community to see a bunch of riser pipes being used as viewed as an illicit discharge, a direct outlet into our ditches. And so a lot of the dairies and a lot of our farmers have been incorporating some blind inlets in, which is basically just that French drain tile underneath. We can farm over it, but it's still there and gives that grass and whatever materials on top of it a chance for any pollutant to settle out before it gets to our tiles. All right, so at that point, once we had everybody on board and we had the plan of action set in place, now it was planting that seed and putting that seed in the best spot that we could get it started and get it growing and build the future. We had to come up with some priority areas. And so our priority areas started with our dairy farms, and Elkhart County was heavily dairied. We're one of the largest dairy counties in the state. And so with the cows and the milk, come manure. And so we had a lot of manure hauling, and with Elkhart County being a manufacturing county, recreation, a lot of tourism, and a lot of urban sprawl, it got very interesting. And so we wanted to be able to put something in that would hold the nutrients back and be green and offer not only our nutrient retention, our soils from leaving the site, but also soil health and working with soil compaction. So with our manure hauling and chopping going on the dairy farms, that was a big issue, and we were highly compacted, and then left bare, soil would be eroded. And so we started with the dairies. And in this slide here, you'll see that we kind of put a border around one of the no-till bean fields to kind of kickstart it. And this slide was back in 2017 when we first started. And we had some skepticism of people getting involved and not being able to really grasp the concept of what they were going to do because they weren't quite used to some change. We put some borders around until they felt comfortable putting the entire field in place. So along with that, the dairies soon realized that they could use this as a feed source, so they could chop it, graze it, hay it, and it gave a great benefit to their feed, and just another avenue and another opportunity for them to hold the nutrients, continue their soil health, and also be a feed source for the dairies. One of the other priority areas was our major tributaries. So we have a lot of ditches and a lot of streams, Elkhart County. And so along with that, we wanted to put our filter strips and a lot of our cover crops in those areas where the ditches and streams and our big regulated drains were located. And thirdly, our highly erodible land, even though we have a lot of heavy clay, we do have a lot of hills and sand in Elkhart County as well. And so it would hold that sand and a lot of our land in place on that highly erodible, and just be able to utilize all of our conservation practices and keep our priority areas in tune. I've got a video here that shows one of our dairies and kind of how they utilize that.
Hi, I'm Brad Paulus. Full-time, I work as a seed salesman for Von Martin Seed and Supply, so I always get to visit and interact with farmers. And then on the side, my dad, my brother, and I, we farm some acreage of our own. Dad still milks cows, so we have some livestock connection. My brother and I, we raise some corn and soybeans and quite a bit of hay. We just happen to fit some cover crops into our rotation as well. Okay, we use the swamp program. We started a few years ago, just kind of looking at the statewide program and how to use cover crops effectively on our farm. We've always liked the thought of soil conservation. We've always liked the thought of nutrient retention with all the livestock we have and all the livestock around in our county, but just could never find a way to make it work really well in our county. We had some struggles the first couple years we tried it. Pulled some moisture out of the ground in some dry springs and had some hard time with crop establishment. Then we approached Elkhart County and realized that they had their local program where we could start utilizing cover crops for feed, and it really perked up our attention since we're heavily into hay marketing and selling and surrounded by livestock. So we started last year dabbling with it. Dad played around for some heifer feed and it worked pretty well for us. It was really nice to be able to capture true feed off of a local program. It gives us an extra crop in a year. My brother and I just happened to purchase some ground, so it was the first true ground we got to experiment on our own acreage where we didn't involve landlords. It was all our decision making. right behind Dad's farm, lots of livestock manure, and we realized that ground in our county is pretty valuable and it's hard to come by, so we just wanted to make this ground as good as it possibly could be. So we started thinking about plans, what would work for us. Manure was number one, but then how do we hang on to all the nutrients in that manure? And cover crops were just really came to our attention. We wanted to apply a lot of fertility, but we wanted to hang on to a lot of that fertility in the soil. We're surrounded by creeks. We didn't want the nutrients to end up in the ditches. We wanted it to stay on the dirt. So this is our first real year taking full advantage of the program. We're really happy with it so far. It's December 10th, and you can see we hauled manure, we planted a really thick cover crop, and we've already taken the cutting off. Really nice livestock feed. It gives us an extra revenue source on our farm. We can grow corn, we can chop it for silage, we can grow soybeans, and we can come right back in, plant a cover crop, retain the nutrients in the soil, prevent soil erosion, and in the fall or the spring, pull the cutting off and have something marketable, either for our own livestock or for neighboring livestock producers. So our plan on this crop is we harvest it once this fall. We're hoping we get enough regrowth in the spring that we'll harvest it again in the spring. And then we're probably going to do some experimenting on termination. We'll probably use some herbicides to see if we get a little bit of regrowth to kill it that way, or we might just try tillage and then terminate it after the fact. We've tried it both ways. We've had kind of success both ways. It's just going to depend on what the spring looks like. But we are planning on harvesting it, so we don't have a major forage mat to deal with. We're not set up for cover crops through our planting system. We're more conventional style of planting setup, so we are planning on doing some tillage to help alleviate some of the residue. But if we harvest it, we'll have a lot less issue with that to begin with. So that's kind of our plan as of right now. It's just been a really neat program for us. I'm pretty excited to try it again in the future. Really excited to see what this ground looks like in a few years with lots of manure and a cover crop holding on to those nutrients. I think we could have some really productive dirt, and that's kind of our end goal. We want this ground to be as good as it possibly can be. So cover crops kind of fit in the mix for us here. It's just been a really neat program.
Thanks for watching.
So once we've planted the seed, now we got to spread it out. And so this slide here kind of shows over the years, we started in 2017 through 2020 now, how this has kind of grown. 2017, we had 7 participants, 1,196 acres, kind of grabbed a hold and took off. 2018, we kicked up to 45 participants, 6,100 acres. In 2019, we ended up at 63 and 7,900 acres. And now in 2020, we finished up with 67 participants with over 12,000 acres planted in cover crops. And that is just cover crop acres there. We also have close to 12 acres of waterways put in and almost 12 acres of filter strips put in place over the course of these years. So that has shown how we've kind of spread that around. Here's kind of a map of Elkhart County and where that started in 2017. The yellow dots there on this map are cover crops. We kind of track some areas, and those green dots are some of our filter strips that were put in and some of our covers from CWI the prior years. But our yellow dots on this map here are our first initial cover crop plantings in 2017 with our swamp program. In 2018, you can see it kind of grew. Our green dots were the kind of the filter strip areas, and the pinkish dots there are the cover crop. And as you can see, a lot of our dairies are in that lock Wakarusa, Southwest, Goshen area. And so that's where a lot of our manure was getting hauled. And so that's where a lot of these guys were starting to put tremendous amount of cover crops out. And so that really grew and really took off there in 18. In 2019, you can see the blue dots, the cover crops across there. And we're getting into some different areas, and it's starting to branch out and get throughout more of the county. It's not all clustered up. And now in 2020, finishing up, a lot of them up along, you can see where the kind of the rivers and streams kind of go. You can see kind of how that kind of got put in place. And those yellow dots represent the 12,000 acres of cover crops that were put out. And so now we were able just to watch it grow. We had stuff put in place. And I should go back and say, like, and I'll flip to this next slide. So here is 2017 through 2020, kind of all grouped together, and a lot of the same participants, but we've gained a lot of first-time cover crop participants. We've picked up a lot of new individuals in our program that didn't usually participate in any programs whatsoever. We did get in that conservative group and made a big impact on our rotational grazing and the exclusion fencing and the cover crops being used as feed and going that route. But I should say, when we talk about our funding source, in 2017, we started with $50,000 is what the Stormwater Board gave the SWCD, $50,000 to put that into place. And they saw the benefits, and they came back and saw what had been put in place, so that when it was budget time in 2018, when I went in, I explained to them the return on investment from the county side of it. And they put $100,000 in our budget for 2018. In 2019, we came back in, same scenario, gave the return on investments. They saw the benefits, and they put $200,000 in our budget for 2019. 2020 came back in, kind of the same scenario. We ended up with $300,000 in our budget for our swamp program. Leading into the future, I don't know where this is going to go, but in 2021, our budget was approved, and we have $400,000 to put in our swamp program for conservation just in Elkhart County. That's how our commissioners, our county council, our different county department heads view this now as a necessity, something that we as a county have to have. And we are noticing now the different city officials coming in, because a lot of our rivers are running through the different bigger cities of Goshen and Elkhart, are noticing not as much flooding, not as much debris coming down into the city areas. They're noticing that the swamp program over the last 4 years has now benefited not only the county, but them as well. So when we talked about that reaping the benefits, that was a huge source for me of showing, because like a lot of other districts around and a lot of counties, we don't always know who our commissioners are going to be. And when I go back to that slide that says we have to create a program that no one can say no, right here is where this slide comes in. It's that return on investments. We not only have to show it for those county officials and different county departments and how that works, but we also have to show the landowner the value in getting this conservation put out on the land, because it's an input and it's a cost that we have to show that there's a reward at the end of this thing and even during. So when we looked at, like in 2017, I can go back to our landowners and our producers and explain to them the on-farm nutrients in 2017, we saved $5,500. Now that might not be much, but that was only over 7 participants. And I can also explain to the county officials that 2,600 tons of soil were kept in place. It did not get into our ditches and streams. And as we moved along in like 2018, we had almost 13,000 tons saved from going into the ditch. And our on-farm nutrients spread out over 45 participants was $28,000. So the return on investment can go on both sides. And from a landowner side of it now, as we've been in it 4 years, they're starting to notice it's not always a dollar amount that's the return on investment. It's their soil. It's the less herbicide. It's the less material coming off or less product. It just is each person, each landowner, each producer, each individual has a different idea of their return on investment. And so we leave that up to them. But I also know that as a county department, we want to be able to show that there is a value. And we can see that value not only from the dollar side of it, but from just a land and being good stewards. As we moved across, 2019 with 63 participants, we ended up with $36,000 worth of on-farm nutrients saved and 17,000 tons of soil stayed on Elkhart County land. And as we finished up this year with 2020, 67 participants, like I said, we had over $36,000 worth of on-farm savings, and we ended up with over 17,000 tons of material saved. So that was probably one of the most difficult things for us because, and I think I speak for a lot of the SWCDs out there, not just in Indiana, but all over the country. A lot of times we don't toot our own horn. And this is one of those programs that we had to beat the pavement. We had to get out. We had to come out of our comfort zone and produce and explain to these landowners and county officials that this is a value and we need to find how that works and make it work for us. So I got a short video here on some participants that have been involved over the course of the last 4 years.
We've been doing the swamp program for several years. It's been a great benefit, we feel, to our soils. It builds up the fertility in the humus soil to get what we're after and creates that residue that we're looking after. Put the fertility back in the soils. It helps on our erosion with some of our more sloped hills. It's been a way to get something accomplished that we've been wanting to do, and it follows up well with our no-till.
We prefer to plant green. We found that has been more beneficial for us. So we go in and plant first, and then we go in after we plant, and then kill it with Roundup, and that's worked really well for killing our cereal rye. We've used 2 different ways: flying it on aerial or putting it on the ground rig with our dry fertilizer. And it kind of all depends. We like the aerial because we can get it on earlier and get more growth to it. And some of the smaller fields we prefer to do with the ground rig, and it's a little bit cheaper that way also.
You know, our only disadvantage maybe a little bit, and it's kind of a one that if that seedling gets pretty tall, we fight that a little bit. We're getting too much growth, and we're still searching to find answers. We don't know all the answers, we'll admit that, but we're learning as we go. And I think, you know, it's a management tool, what it is in your toolbox, if you will. And so there can be a problem with that a little bit, getting too much growth for what we've seen in it. But that's our only negative. We've only seen most of the positives.
Our biggest disadvantage of we have found is in that 6 foot tall rye, when we plant into that green, it makes our soybeans want to grow taller and then fall down. So we haven't done it yet because we haven't had to do it again, but probably going back in there and rolling that rye down flat, and then that'll keep our beans from getting too tall.
When you have a lot of people sit here in the background, see what us farmers do, this is something that we're conserving that soil and the silt runoff. It's a great benefit to the soil that some people may see what we've done, and when you see that dirt blow in the spring, you know, we don't have that anymore, you know, because we don't till it, and the cover crops help hold all that in place. So, and I think we as stewards and farmers of the soil, that we need to head that direction to keep that ground growing something all year round, and it just makes sense to use that program to do that.
It has helped actually more in our post application. Our cereal rye really helps with keeping those weeds down after our burn down, and we haven't had to apply as much herbicide on post as we have. Probably our main reason is to help our soils, especially on our hills. We got a few hills behind here, and when we used to chisel plow, they used to wash out quite a bit, and now going no-till, especially cover crops, have held all the soil there, and we haven't had erosion, or barely any erosion, since we have done that. So we know it's helping the soil from erosion part, and then also organic matter, it's helping that build that up on a lot of our sandy soils, and then helping with the herbicide and helping earthworms get going. It's kind of one of those things, we know there's a benefit, and it's helped a lot with weed control, especially in that soil erosion and stuff like that. But to actually put a number on it, it's kind of hard to do that, but we know it does help.
You know, if we don't preserve the soils for future generations, that's what I'm kind of looking at, I guess, because, you know, somebody's going to be farming this ground for a long time, and we have that objective at this point in time to start something. And if you don't start, you keep doing it the same, you never do change. And, you know, I've been honestly one of the proponents to tell Scott here that, you know, that's one thing that we need to do is kind of change up a little bit, just because we've always plowed, or, you know, we've always done the same routines year after year. You don't know how to change, and I think when we make changes in agriculture like we've done, you got to experiment on a small level to start with, but you never know where it's going to take you. And I think the swamp program is one of those, looking outside the box, and it's been a great program for us.
Thanks for watching.
So as we had all that stuff put in place, and we looked at how the cover crops, the filter strips, the grass waterways have been working, and we see the benefits of the amount of budget that has come up over the last couple of years we start looking at the future on what this holds for local conservation and bringing it home and taking some ownership of this thing and not relying on too many others. So some of the things that have come out of this is we created a basic water test kit, which is a very simple nitrite, phosphorus kit that basically you can put in your pocket, put together. We give it to landowners, and basically it's to create data, to create that, start the information, put together the information coming from your tiles, your ditches, your runoff. And a lot of the farmers they grab it and they'll throw it on the dash, the truck, they'll be in the tractor, and they'll be curious. And that started out of this, and we see that being a big benefit to help our landowners here, our producers, look at collecting the data and knowing what they are sending down their tiles. what is going into their ditch? Is there a hot spot? What can we do different? And that basic water test kit helps answer some of those questions, or it creates new questions that they come into our office and ask, what can we do different? What can we do? And again, it puts us in a spot as an SWCD to be that helping hand and be a resource to reach out and partner up with different organizations. Again, working with other county departments. That was a huge goal of mine when I started here in 5 years, was that I wanted this department to be known in every county department. And so now we're involved in the county highway department, planning and zoning, health department with our test kits and whatnot, and illicit discharge and water testing, working with those individuals, surveyors department, assessors. We're looking at different areas that are taxable and non-taxable. And so now these county departments are all looking to us as an SWCD as an essential. We need to know what is going on. And so we work very closely now with a lot of our different county departments. Building our own research data. I know years ago, we would come off and I would meet with farmers in different places and talk about their land and no-till and cover crops and putting on stuff. And they would always, the answer I always got was, my soil is different than theirs. Everybody's is different. And so that was one of the things I got tired of hearing. And so what we're working on now and putting in place is building our own research data. I want to put something together that is going to last and be studied over the next 10, 15 years, that we know our infiltration rate. We know what products work for us in the soil infiltration and managing our water and knowing how to handle our different conservation practices. And so we're building our own research program and using that to the best of our ability to show local landowners that it really isn't different. This stuff works, and it might not all work in the same spot, but there's pieces and parts of it that can be put into place, and hopefully everybody can use some of that. And then the final is our water quality. We from Elkhart County want to send our water on cleaner than we receive it. And so it gives us an opportunity to do that using our local dollars, creating that sponge and holding that water back and cleaning it up before it goes on, because it's so important for our future and next generations coming up, and that we do that. And that was one of the things through the swamp program that we really wanted to see in the future, other individuals sitting down in these around the table and another SWCD board looking at and saying, hey, we can use that. We can put a piece of that together. I understand why they did that. And that was important for us as from an Elkhart County SWCD board and from the staff here, is that we start something that doesn't finish. It continues, it goes, and is usable for as long as it needs to. And so we, again, thank everybody for the opportunity for being here. Got a short video to finish up, and then we'll gladly take any questions later on.
Well, I'm Keith Miller, New Paris, Indiana. I got started with conservation tillage and no tillage. This field behind us that was last plowed in 1973.
Carl Stolzfus, Prairie Dairy Farms. We've worked with the county on the swamp program for about 4 years now. We've had a chance to utilize it in many different ways.
Hi, I'm Jackie with a local fertilizer company, and for probably the last 3 years we've worked with the swamp program. We have really promoted the swamp program so that the customer can get about $30 back an acre, and they were able to benefit the environment with the cover crop and not be putting down the burn down and the chemicals that they had been doing.
So one of the best things that the swamp program has done for us is fill the gap between doing nothing and not quite fitting into other government programs. It provides a real common sense approach to problem solving, where our whole goal is to improve water quality.
For us as a company, as a local company, we have really found a benefit in that for the farmer, and a lot of the conservatives have really jumped up to that program. Just letting that information out there has really drawn attention to it.
I have used county programs in the past, and the money they provide, it'll help you get started without risking your capital if you're getting started. And they're great. They're well-researched programs. They're done. They're not something that someone dreamed up and has never been done.
Some of the big improvements we've seen have been building organic matter in the soil, improving water filtration, and just increasing the soil health and tilth.
Water quality, there's a tremendous difference. But the real bottom line is to keep your farm on your farm. The left is a full tillage after a small amount of rain, and the right is 15 years of no-till. Well, if you're losing your best soil down the river, you can't get it back.
Those dollars have really helped us in trying to find what really fits best and works well on our acres. Whereas most other programs want you to do it one set way and by their rules, and that just doesn't always work, on the farm.
It's been really helpful for us as a local company. It brought revenue in for us, and it has helped the farmer as well.
And it's great. You can work for yourself. You can work for your family. It's been very good to me over the years. I continue because it gives a greater return on investment. It's working with nature rather than doing so much work to work against her.
Really appreciate your time today, Jim, joining us for our annual meeting and kicking off our breakout sessions. Another group of sessions are taking place at 4 o'clock Eastern in about 30 minutes. They include presentations from the Indian Nation Conservation Alliance, Field to Market, and districts across the country from New Jersey to Minnesota to Oregon. Please go back to the agenda to see which of those you want to join. And as always, we appreciate you joining NACD for our annual meeting this afternoon.